Right, it's time for the Thursday Night Rant, and we're calling it the Thursday Night Rant because couldn't come up with a better title. Right, Need for Speed Unbound is it's a bit of a surprising release, isn't it? Because well, it's not a surprise that there's a Need for Speed game coming out, but I think what is a surprise is that it's good.
I think it's also a surprise that there's a new Need for Speed coming out because EA feels like they have done everything in their power to hide that thing and not talk about it, or like that game has existed on their earning calls for 2 years now.
Really? Okay.
Like almost as a threat. It's like there's a new Need for Speed coming. It's in development. Okay. Yeah. What is it? What's it? They don't talk about it. And then the next thing comes on. It's like the new Need for Speed that we told you about is still in fact in development, and it's coming out before the end of this calendar year. This being 2022. It's like, okay, what is it? And it's like, maybe they'll announce it at E3. E3, nothing. Maybe Gamescom. Opening night live. Jeff Keighley's own. Nope, nothing. And then they literally just announced it like 6 weeks ago. It's like, hey, by the way, this is coming out.
That's right. I remember, because all that happened, and I just started at this job and I wasn't really up on gaming you. So I just assumed that it was something that was, always kind of waiting in the wings that we all knew about, and it just kind of, dropped. But you're telling me that that was basically that was the first anyone had really seen of it or heard of it.
5 or 6 weeks ago was the first time that they announced an official title.
That's insane.
Before that, it was like a shot of literally 2 cars, a Porsche 911 and some American muscle car bullshit. In
just a bad car.
That don't like muscle cars. In the desert, it's like Criterion is making this.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember that E3 where they had that game from Motive that was canceled? That was supposed to be like a creative playground for players.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was and then they showed a shot of Battlefield, someone's face, and like a building being destroyed.
Yeah.
Like that aspirational E3 that they had.
Yeah.
That was that E3. It was like, oh, also making a car game from the car people. It's like, okay, cool. Nothing whatsoever until that moment. They didn't even show it to the press. They did not show it to influencers. You could not find a single piece of media of that game that did not come out of EA, which is fascinating.
And it's so weird because apparently it seems quite good.
Yes.
The demo, it seems really good. It's not the sort of game they'd love to champion and show off, right?
What I remember of it being sort of unveiled properly was people on our site talking about how it's got these cartoon sort of smoke coming out of the wheels, and it looks like there was this real clash of 2 art styles, right? 2 really distinct. Like on the one hand, you've got this Into the Spider-Verse, heavily stylized cartoon graphics everywhere. You've got cell shaded characters, and then on the other side, you've got just highly detailed, quite natural looking models of cars, and it's kind of I think it reminded me a little bit of Blur, that kind of kart game on the 360 that had
underrated game.
Yeah, really underrated. I loved that game. And it was like this kind of like a blend of Mario Kart, but it was with real cars, and it was weird.
Yep.
I loved that game actually, and this has got a little bit of that. And you can't throw fireballs or anything, but it's got that kind of. It's like at the intersection between 2 completely different styles of game, and that's pretty cool. And I think the contrast between the art styles, first of all, works because they're so disparate. The clash is where the magic works. It could have been terrible, but it just something about it just happens to work.
Honestly, you could just put this on the back of the box of this game. This could have been terrible, but oh my god.
I was going to say every element of it is this could have been bad, but and I've just having played the intro and stuff. There's a 10 hour trial version that you can get if you've got EA Play or Game Pass Ultimate. And which should do the game some favors, actually, getting this into people's hands, because I think it's quite difficult to convince people that it's worth spending money on, just by telling them about it, because it looks goofy, right, in screenshots and stuff. But when you're playing it, it feels great. The handling is so much nicer than previous Need for Speeds, and You wrote a piece recently, Sharif, on VG247 about how the Need for Speed has finally found a sort of identity with this game, which has been lacking.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned in that, not to rehash all of it, but basically since Rivals at the start of the last generation, PS4 and Xbox One, those games just never, something about them never felt right to me as a longtime fan. Like the last one of those that I truly enjoyed was the last one that Criterion worked on. I think it was the Most Wanted remake or the Hot Pursuit remake. And then when they did like, oh, we're moving to Frostbite now, and look, just something about those games never really, like they looked fine, but they were always like, anytime you get out of the garage and you go to an open world, always look like they're stretched. You know, you get a controller and you play the game, and it's like, what, like I could not for the life of me for all those games just try to understand like what model are you trying to give me here? Like, okay, if this is arcade, tap to break, have fun, or is this like we're sticky on the track like Forza? And it always like falls somewhere in between that I just like, I want to enjoy this game, I just can't. Something is like really in the handling breaking me. And so I tried with every one of those. Last year's Heat was the closest they have gotten to at least a compelling argument for why Need for Speed needs to exist. Because for my money, all that time has just been chasing the Forza high and be like, oh, well, Forza has drift zones. We need to have drift zones. Well, Forza gives you points for running on the oncoming lane on a highway. We need to have that as well. Why? Like, how does that make sense in your game? Like, okay, like it's fun to have points, but why? Like, why? And in this game, they finally it's like, okay, if you run on the oncoming, you can charge your nitros faster. Forza can't do that. Forza doesn't have nitros. Okay, if you do a high jump and break through a billboard, the Criterion Classic, you're going to have like a super nitros that's separate from the other nitros that you just activate with one tap instead of a hold. That's going to get, it's like, okay, that makes sense to me. I understand why this exists. I'm going to do it. I'm going to engage with this mechanic. Like, it's just an example. But really, to me, the whole thing is just so far removed from what you think of a racing game today that it's almost refreshing to see like, oh, this is a game without rewinds. This is a game where if you flop a corner, the last thing, you're done. Like, go back and restart.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but you just wasted 5 minutes of my time. So what? Like, do it again. You'll it's one of those games. It's a game that's like, okay, this is a racing game. It's not so much a car collecting open world festival type thing. No, you need to understand what the track is doing. You need to figure out your corner, restart. And they add on top of that the risk reward mechanic of it, of the outrunning the cops and like upping your heat level every time, and then that carrying over into different races. So you could be doing a race and doing really well, and if it's a street race, a cop could just cut you off, and it screws the whole thing. And it's like, and you can't escape that. Like if you try to, you obviously you failed this race, but even if you don't, the chase is going to continue after the race, which is super fun because you're like, you won, really you lost. And it's like, oh, by the way, remember the 2 cop cars chasing you? Oh, they're still on you, by the way. So 3, 2, 1, go. And you just have, okay, Yeah. And then it is such a different thing from what people think of racing games now, because there aren't any anymore, and Forza's like controlling the mind share. Like, oh, you just race cars. And it's like, but it feels really personal. It feels like, no, this is my car. I built it. I did this. I'm betting money. I'm losing money. I'm risking it. I'm doing a thing, and not just, oh, look, this McLaren P1. Oh, look, it's this thing. And nothing is just, everything is just handed over to you.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It really looked like it's kind of like, it's gone back to that classic Need for Speed sort of feel and energy, but with like good modern handling, good like gameplay experience. It kind of feels like they've got back into like what makes the series so, or at least what made the series so fun ages ago, and we kind of captured it again. Does that kind of sound about right? Yeah, because like,
absolutely,
it's got all those sort of aspects for Need for Speed that like I imagine fans have been like missing for a long time, and they've managed to kind of find it again. Which seems
they were
like
honestly they felt like they were lost. Like all these other games, they were just like, what do we do? Like, what is a racing game anymore? This is the first one that's like, no, this is Need for Speed. This is not Forza. Here's why.
There's a weird thing where I don't know if I'm completely off the mark here, but I always felt like after Burnout Paradise, like the Need for Speed games that came out sort of post Burnout Paradise all felt like, because they were the same dev, right? It felt like they were sort of all spiritual follow-ups to Burnout Paradise, but all because they weren't Burnout games. It was like they were weird hybrids of Burnout and Need for Speed. Am I getting that right? Like there was a sort of like, because Burnout Paradise in particular was like arcadey, and it was all about and it had that stuff about like you weren't punished really for anything in Burnout Paradise. You kind of like you smash the car up, and it's like, hey, it's part of the fun, and you keep going, and it was just a sort of like a driving playground, similar to Forza, but a bit dafter, a bit more sort of cartoonish in a way.
More aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, and I think but this Need for Speed gets back to that sort of like, as stylized as it is, it does get back to that, like, this is like a hard sort of like the hard reality of street racing would be, where like it's not forgiving because like all your peers are calling you a wanker, and the environment is very competitive and very brutal, and the cops are always on you, and it's like it's supposed to be a fun time, but it's not supposed to be an easy time. It's kind of inspired by like what should be a fairly brutal environment, and in a cartoony way. It's more Fast and Furious than like actual street racing where people get shot, but like it's I think it should have a little bit of that edge, and it should feel like there should be high stakes. You should feel like, oh man, if I cock this up, there's some stakes here. I'm going to lose progress
and money, because this is the other thing about this game is that
you can win a race and then just get arrested, right, and lose like a bunch of that payout.
Well, that is possible, but also a lot of the races in this game have a buy-in, so you need money to even enter. So if you need money, and it's like, okay, and they've balanced it fairly tight. So sometimes it's like, oh, it's the $1,500 buy-in. Yeah. And for you to recoup that, stay like 0-0, you have to come like fourth. So if you do worse than that, you're effectively losing money. So you have to do better than that to be like, oh, I just won $500 because that money just canceled out. And then in the event itself, you can do side bets where it's like, okay, I think I can easily take this person. So I'm betting them for like 500 extra, separate from the price of this race. So that's another fun thing. And so you could end the race with all these winnings and then screw up a jump or whatever, and then just get T-boned by a cop. And like there's a screenshot that I have. Brilliant. I lost 25,000, which 25,000 might not seem like a lot, but that's like basically a day and night's worth of grinding races and doing like collectibles and doing shit. Effectively, the price of a car that I just gone.
That's brilliant. The whole idea of like these high intensity like street races, like side bets and stuff, like takes you back to those like early Fast and Furious movies. That kind of, I don't know, that tone that I always attributed to Need for Speed at its best.
Oh, I'm resisting a really strong 2015 urge to call it the Dark Souls of racing. Sorry, I said it. Sorry. I hate myself. I said it. I hate myself. Sorry. Right. Purge that thought. So I think it's a really fantastic effort. It's such a good revitalization of a series which did kind of lose its way and felt really. Why is Frostbite like the mind killer?
Because Frostbite is like fear, because it makes developers at EA just shudder.
Like what is it? Like there's been some debate over the past. I think the generally accepted sort of consensus is that the shift to Frostbite is a huge factor, or not the only factor, but a huge factor in why Andromeda sucked, or why Dragon Age Inquisition was like
a lot of padded. In fact, I would say most of EA's games over that generation, you could attribute Frostbite as like one of the key reasons why they sucked. Obviously, not everything is you can play on the tools, but that thing, every single studio that had worked on it has repeatedly and publicly said this is a struggle, and it has been like more than it needs to be. And I think Need for Speed was most of all one of the games affected by this, because it's like, you're trying to put a square peg in a whatever. Like this is not it. Why are you like self-sabotaging yourself like that? And it's like, but this is gonna get better, and it doesn't. This is the first time that it gets better, and I'm happy for them. And I wonder like how much work they had to do on the back end of that thing to make it work. Because it just felt like a really self-inflicted wound that's unnecessary.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Why? You had a good engine. Like you don't want to pay some license money to Epic, really? Like, and what's the cost? Like to have these games just come out and be like fundamentally broken like that?
I mean, none of this has convinced anyone else to sort of look at Frostbite as a third-party engine, have they?
No, it's purely internal, isn't it?
I don't think they're even selling
it's not even.
If they did,
it's like so. It's like it would be like it's not something they're even selling as middleware. But even if it was, they've just had a string, like a decade of terrible adverts for it. So what is the fucking end game here?
Yeah,
just to save a few quid to not give it to
the
Epic.
end game is the thing that they should have done a long time ago, which is basically they opened up other, like they're going to start using Unreal again, and it's gonna they're going to start like Respawn has been using Unreal. They have been using Source.
Mass Effect's back to Unreal for the next one.
Mass Effect's back to Unreal. They have basically loosened that grip. So at the end of it, it's going to just be the sports games, which have been moved on to Frostbite. Battlefield, obviously, whatever that happens with that thing. And then maybe the next Need for Speed. I guess leave it where it makes sense, which is just like, of course, like that makes sense.
I do feel that Need for Speed Unbound and certainly the what feels like a bit of a recouping of goodwill that BioWare is kind of doing at the moment, and a bunch of other things are happening that are sort of, because EA used to be a real powerhouse, and in recent years they have not been. They've been a kind of a bit of a, I mean, I don't want to say a joke because I don't want to be mean, but they have been like really lackluster, and I don't think anyone is particularly excited for an EA showcase anymore, right? Because what if
the joke I used to make is like, oh, they don't make video games anymore. Like it's just like FIFA, and it's like, cool.
They've got
what else do you have?
They've got a really weird reputation where if they release a game that I think is good but doesn't really perform that well, I'm just terrified they're shutter the studio. I'm terrified that this Need for Speed seems great, right? And it would be I can't not picture this game coming out and not selling to a certain metric and them just killing Need for Speed after they finally make a good one after a decade. Like they waited all this time.
Hey, look, Mass Effect survived Andromeda, right? So like there's always hope.
I don't think you can say that without seeing what happens with the next game. Like I think maybe we don't have that knowledge yet.
All right, it's kind of Schrodinger's Mass Effect. Mass Effect might survive Andromeda, right?
Okay,
so there's always.
If to put a positive spin on it, I think that it would be really cool if a new Need for Speed game came out and was really good, and finally seems to have like found its way again, and this is like a new era for Need for Speed. I really hope it sells well and people care about Need for Speed still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, it just seems brilliant. It seems really, really cool.
Anyone like listening or watching to this who's had even the passing interest in Need for Speed in the past and was just never really hooked by it because we've been playing Forza, EA Play is part of Xbox Game Pass on PC, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and you could just pay them $4.50 or $5. You'll get 10 hours, more than enough time to make up your mind. Do yourself a favor and try that. I know I look like a shell. I'm selling you on a subscription, but really, if you like fun racing games and Need for Speed has been just leading you astray, just put 10 hours into it and then make up your mind. It's outright.
And I feel like in that 10 hours in this, you will spend 10 hours like racing, and in 200 hours of Forza 5, you'll spend about 3 hours actually racing.
Absolutely. Racing is almost inconsequential in Forza.
Racing's like a mini game. It's not even.
It's just so sad.
I've been Jim Trinker for VG247, and you should definitely like and subscribe because if you don't, you smell. Check out the website, check out the podcast, check it all out. Check it out like it's supermarket sweet, man. I'll speak to you later.